Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here today during our lunch hour webinar. We're so glad that you're able to join us this afternoon to learn about climate adaptation in Wisconsin and to enjoy the debut film screening of Weathering the Change, Climate Adaptation at Rush Creek. My name is Kate Williamson, and I'm the Director of Conservation at the Natural Resources Foundation of Wisconsin. And I also serve on the Advisory Council for the Wisconsin Initiative on Climate Change Impacts, or WICI, which you'll be hearing more about today. I'm joined today by my colleague, Amy Staffen, who's an ecologist with the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, and also the co-chair of the WICI Plants and Natural Communities Working Group. So during today's webinar, we'll be sharing an overview of climate change impacts in Wisconsin, what climate adaptation is to kind of get you familiar with that, talk about how it can be really applied to conservation efforts. And then we're going to be highlighting 4 climate adaptation projects in different parts of Wisconsin that the Natural Resources Foundation has been involved in, which have really stemmed from WICI initiatives in partnership with the Department of Natural Resources. So these are all on state-owned public lands. We'll then debut the short film. It's about 10 minutes long, and we'll have a Q&A session at the end to try to answer as many of your questions as we can. So thank you so much for your interest in this really incredibly important work. Before we get started, I did want to give a little bit of an overview of the Natural Resources Foundation of Wisconsin for those who might be new to NRF. So we are a statewide, Wisconsin-based nonprofit organization, and our mission is to protect our state's lands, waters, and wildlife by providing funding, leading partnerships, and connecting all people to nature in Wisconsin. As a foundation, we grant out about $1 million each year to on-the-ground conservation and environmental education efforts, supporting the work of hundreds of different partners across the state, including the climate adaptation projects that you'll be hearing about today. Our signature programs, including the field trip program and the Birdathon and others, really connect directly with Wisconsinites and provide opportunities to learn about and connect with through hands-on experiences and give back to Wisconsin's natural wonders. In addition, we really help to advance conservation efforts across Wisconsin by leveraging funding and resources, bringing people together, and just working to protect our most unique landscapes and wildlife species across the state. We're really honored to help support the amazing work happening at all of these sites that you'll be learning about and seeing in the film today, together with our conservation partners. We are a membership-based organization, and we would love it if you joined us as a member. You can learn more about our work at NRF and become a member today by visiting our website, wisconservation.org. I also want to put in a quick plug for the Birdathon, so save the date. It's coming up again this spring, any day between April 15th and June 15th. And this is an amazing event. It's really popular. That we've been running for over a decade now, and it's great for groups of friends or families, school groups, coworkers, neighbors, and other groups of people. And it raises over $100,000 each year for bird conservation. So we hope you'll join us and make a flock of your own. Registration will open on March 15th. And the funds raised through the Birdathon support really high priority bird conservation projects, from habitat work to monitoring populations and inspiring the next generation of bird conservationists. So you can learn more about that at wibirdathon.org. And also a quick plug for our field trip program. If you know, field trip program is a really popular program that we run. And registration for this year's lineup opens on April 8th. It's just a really incredible opportunity to get out with amazing experts such as Amy and other folks who really just share their passion and knowledge for Wisconsin. We have a stellar lineup this year, including visiting some of the places that we'll feature today. This picture here was taken on one of our NRF field trips to Rush Creek. That's definitely an offering that we have this summer. Access to our field trip program is a benefit of being a member of NRF, so make sure that you sign up to become a member or renew your membership. so that you receive our guidebook in the mail. They'll be hitting mailboxes in early March. You can visit wisconservation.org/field trips to learn more. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amy to share a little bit more about climate change in Wisconsin. Thank you, Amy.
Hey, thank you. Hey, everyone. As mentioned earlier, I work at the Wisconsin DNR in the Natural Heritage Conservation Program, and I lead a working group for the Wisconsin Initiative on Climate Change Impacts, or WICI. WICI is a collaboration of diverse groups, including the Natural Resources Foundation, that come from across the state, and we evaluate climate change impacts in Wisconsin and foster solutions. In the next few slides, I'm going to give you some basic information about climate change impacts in Wisconsin and how the conservation community is grappling with these impacts. From a global perspective, it's sobering to note that 2024 was the hottest year on record since the start of the industrial era in 1850, and it was the first year to exceed the 1.5 degrees Celsius global warming threshold set by the Paris Climate Agreement. WICI scientists have documented continuing warming trends in Wisconsin as well, along with increasingly wetter conditions and more frequent and intense storms. In Wisconsin, 2010 to 2019 was the wettest decade ever. Next slide. Now, what can we do about climate change? There are two general responses: adaptation and mitigation. Climate adaptation means adjusting to current impacts of climate change and then preparing for future impacts as well. Climate adaptation is being considered across many sectors in Wisconsin, from ensuring that farmers can continue to grow our food, to replacing undersized culverts with bigger ones, to planting trees in cities to protect city dwellers from heat stroke. The other response to climate change is mitigation. Mitigation is done by reducing greenhouse gas emissions to lessen the effects of climate change. The most common and most important means of mitigating climate change is by reducing human-caused emissions of greenhouse gases. And this is done partly by shifting to renewable energy sources and by conserving energy. A less well-known form of climate change mitigation involves protecting and restoring natural areas or wildlands. Our prairies, forests, and wetlands are really our planet's life support system. Trees, for example, are able to sequester carbon in their wood, branches, and roots, meaning less greenhouse gases in the atmosphere and reduced climate change impacts. The healthier the forest, the stronger those benefits are. Wetlands and grasslands serve as nature's sponges, slowing the flow of stormwater and reducing flooding. Not only that, grasslands and wetlands can also sequester large amounts of carbon, just like forests. These are just a few ways in which natural areas can mitigate the impacts of climate change, but we need to help them adapt to a changing climate in order to keep them healthy and functional. Next, please. Wisconsin's native habitats and wildlife are already stressed by development, invasive species, deer browse, and other threats. Climate change exacerbates these existing threats and brings new ones too. For example, as we have milder winters with less snow, deer can more readily browse woody plants, thus limiting regeneration of young trees. My WICI Plants and Natural Communities Working Group is working with the natural area managers to consider how will climate change impact the site that I manage, and what actions can I take to promote resilience and protect species. Let's consider this within the context of several types of conservation projects: prairies, forests, and vulnerable animals. Next, please. Thanks. Wisconsin was an early pioneer of restoring former agricultural lands back to prairies, and we now have thousands of acres of prairie plantings across the state, which is wonderful. With climate change, prairie planting sites may see wide climate fluctuations now, from periods of drought to periods of extreme precipitation. Since prairie plantings require a significant amount of effort and money, you want to hedge your bets towards successful germination and establishment of all those precious seeds that you throw down on the ground. In response to a changing climate, we are promoting a prairie species smorgasbord of sorts, where restoration practitioners plant a broad array of species, from those that tolerate drought to those that tolerate flooding and everything in between. It's just like diversifying an investment portfolio, spreading your risk across numerous assets. In this situation, we will have a diverse seed bank that allows species to wax and wane over time as they respond to changing conditions. Next, please. Climate change threatens Wisconsin's forests, too, in a variety of ways. One stems from the increasing stress that trees are experiencing in response to drought and extreme heat in summer. I also mentioned earlier how lack of snow leads to increasing deer browse. Well, that snow also serves as an insulating blanket in winter. Without it, trees can get frost damaged. One way that we're adapting to these changing conditions is by conducting controlled burns in forests that are naturally adapted to fire. That exposure to fire actually promotes drought and frost tolerance in trees, as well as in plants. Next slide, please. In the realm of wildlife, we're seeing some species shifting their range northward to track suitable climate envelopes. That is, local climate conditions that allow the species to live, thrive, and reproduce. In Wisconsin, the federally endangered Carter blue butterfly requires a flower called wild lupin. But unfortunately, this plant isn't shifting northward at the same pace as the butterflies. Some climate adaptation actions to support this species include expanding suitable barrens habitat with lupin northward, and by creating habitat corridors to allow the species to disperse to new suitable habitats. Next. Lastly, there is cause for concern for the common loon, a favorite nesting bird in Wisconsin's northern lakes. The extreme storms associated with climate change and increasing overall precipitation are leading to flooded nests. So wildlife biologists are encouraging the protection of existing habitat and providing artificial nest platforms to keep the nests above the rising waters. And that are just some examples of climate adaptation in action in the conservation world.
Thanks so much, Amy. So we're now going to share some more information with you about specific climate adaptation projects that are happening right now in Wisconsin. So the map that you see here is pulled from the forestadaptation.org webpage, which really maps out demonstration sites, climate adaptation demonstration sites that are happening all across the country. So as you can see here, there's already quite a few in Wisconsin, especially in our northern forests, but we definitely want to see more. The 4 highlighted in red or circled in red here, well, and actually one, there isn't a spot yet because it's so new, it's not even up on the map, but that's where it would be. These are the ones that we're going to be highlighting today. These are all projects that are made possible through really outstanding partnerships with the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, who owns and manages and is implementing this work, as well as many other partner groups, including WICI and the Northern Institute for Applied Climate Science, as well as tribes, nonprofits, and other partners. NRF has played a role in all of these projects by securing funding from grants and from major individual donations to really support this work and to help bring these projects to life. 3 of them were supported through NRF's Wisconsin's Climate Response Fund, which was set up by longtime NRF members to help build climate resiliency for Wisconsin's lands, waters, and wildlife. So we're going to start our tour up in the North Woods at Spur Lake, which is a state natural area located in Oneida County. Spur Lake is both an ecologically important site and a very culturally significant site for the Ojibwe people, who have harvested manoomin, or wild rice, here for generations. Unfortunately, a couple of decades ago, wild rice all but disappeared from Spur Lake, and climate change impacts were part of the issue. The Wisconsin DNR reached out to the local tribes to learn more about their relation to the site, and from there grew a partnership that has been working to bring back wild rice to Spur Lake. It started with an adaptation workshop back in 2019. So adaptation workshops are something that really is a process that helps land managers and those who care for wildlands and places to really understand what are the expected climate change impacts for that certain area, and what can they do as land managers, what can they do differently to help that place really adapt to those expected impacts. So those workshops are a really important component. This partnership really continues today with the Mole Lake Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa, the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission, or GLFWC, DNR, and others. The tribes have been tremendous leaders in working on climate adaptation here in Wisconsin and other parts of the country, as seen through this project. And they also created a tribal climate adaptation menu, which is just an incredible resource that we'll talk about later. The specific climate adaptation efforts put into use at Spur Lake include monitoring and controlling aquatic vegetation, which has really crowded out the wild rice, working with neighbors to install culverts, which can help with water flow, another really important for manoomin, and of course, reseeding manoomin. The picture that you see here is an aerial image of Spur Lake. You can see how overgrown it is in the green with that really competitive aquatic vegetation that really crowds out manoomin. The clear plots that you see, the squares, were cleared by a machine called a swamp devil, which opens up the water, allowing the team to reseed wild rice there and make sure it has what it needs to survive. NRF has now played a role in securing funding for the project and supporting communications and outreach as well. We had a beautiful film made about this project as well. Perhaps some of you have seen it. Please check out our website here, wisconservation.org/spur-lake, to see that film. It's another short one. And if you happen to be in Madison, we're thrilled that the film will be shown at the Wild and Scenic Film Festival happening next month. So you can watch it on the big screen if you're able to join for that, or you can watch it at any time on that webpage. All right, next up, Amy.
Okay, sorry, I was typing an answer to a question in the Q&A. My turn kind of snuck up on me. All right, another amazing site that NRF, the DNR, and Wiki are supporting in the face of climate change is South Bluff Devil's Nose State Natural Area. This is in Sauk County and is embedded in Devil's Lake State Park in south central Wisconsin. Next slide, please. At over 3,000 acres, South Bluff Devil's Nose State Natural Area supports the largest block of unfragmented forest in southern Wisconsin and hosts some really cool, rare, and unusual native plant communities like bedrock glades and pine relics. Workshop participants were particularly worried about the increasing threat of invasive species, which actually benefit from climate change. They were also very concerned about the perfect storm of stressors on trees, from windstorms to erosion, drought, frost damage, and extreme heat. One thing that I want to impress upon you is the importance of size, connectivity, and context. I want you to picture in your mind a tiny 10-acre woodlot surrounded by development or ag land. And now imagine how vulnerable to the ravages of storms and other stressors that would be. And if the climate there becomes inhospitable, where can those plants and animals go? Now picture Devil's Nose South Bluff State Natural Area with its huge size, variable topography, along with its location in the vast Baraboo Hills ecoregion, where partners like the Nature Conservancy and NRF and the DNR and local landowners are protecting vast tracts of forest. This site will be much more resilient in the face of climate change and other stressors. The species have space to shift across the landscape in response to a changing climate, and they are at least moderately buffered from storms and rising temperatures. And just imagine how the Baraboo Hills are mitigating climate change for us and our planet. Imagine all the carbon that these forests are sequestering. These ideas and others from our climate adaptation workshop that we held last year will be shared for consideration during DNR master planning for this site in the future. Next slide. Another site where NRF is funding climate adaptation is Beulah Bog State Natural Area in Walworth County in southeastern Wisconsin. I bet you all didn't realize that we actually have bogs in southern Wisconsin. It's pretty amazing and quite unexpected. These are relics of a past climate epoch that have managed to persist in basins where cool, moist conditions prevail. Next slide, please. Because this site supports species like tamarack and other bog species that more typically occur in northern Wisconsin, this is one of the most vulnerable habitats to climate change. In 2020, I worked with the DNR property managers during a workshop to identify management actions that would best support these vulnerable plant communities. Just a few of the actions identified included closely monitoring for invasive species that threaten rare plants and elevating boardwalks to accommodate rising water levels. In the surrounding oak woodlands, they are also planting native species that are anticipated to survive under a warming climate.
Thanks, Amy. All right, last up, we've got our fourth and final example of climate adaptation in action. And then, of course, this is a site that you're going to be seeing and learning more about shortly here in the film. So Rush Creek is known as the crown jewel of Wisconsin state natural areas. If you haven't visited yet, I really hope you get a chance to do so, maybe on one of our NRF field trips. So this Rush Creek project is the first remnant grassland climate adaptation site in the state of Wisconsin, which is pretty exciting. The DNR completed the adaptation workshop back in 2020, and the following year, NRF was awarded a $300,000 grant from the Wildlife Conservation Society's Climate Adaptation Fund, which was leveraged with matching funds to implement this project. It was really an incredible opportunity to bring this work to life in a big way. The project is really making Rush Creek more resilient to a changing climate, and that's happening at this really large site. So the site overall is over 3,000 acres, and its location on the Mississippi River is just absolutely incredible in terms of migratory birds. And then you think about the beautiful mosaic of habitats that you'll see in the film here in a minute, just make it a really important site for different natural communities. So there's dry bluff prairies you saw in that first picture in here, facing the river. There's oak woodland, there's oak hickory forest, there's 2 miles of spring-fed streams. It's just a really important site for a lot of different species. Because of the diversity of habitat, a lot of different wildlife are found here, including nearly 50 threatened, endangered, and at-risk species. So this 3-year project, which just wrapped up, And we always say, part of the project wrapped up, but part of it's just starting, right? It never ends. But this part of the project wrapped up in 2024 and established over 1,000 acres of climate adaptation work that really happened across the site. That included reconnecting and really reinvigorating the prairie and savanna habitat across the 2 miles of bluffs along the riverway. Bigger is definitely better when we're thinking about climate adaptation for species, as Amy was sharing earlier. And really by reconnecting these prairies, it allows populations of plants and animals to no longer be isolated and to support gene flow, which is really critical for populations. As you'll hear more about in the film, another key piece of the project was to use a climate-ready planting list, or I appreciate how Amy's calling this a prairie species smorgasbord, which really just allows the site to be prepared to adapt to different climate, a variety of climate conditions, whether that's extreme rainfall or extreme drought. You really have a lot of different plant species there to be able to adapt. So these are just a small subset of the adaptation actions that have been taken at the site and which will continue to be used at Rush Creek. And you'll get to learn more in the film. So together with our partners, we really wanted to have a short film made that would tell the story of the Rush Creek project. We worked with breakout filmmaker Ben Albert, winner of the Best First Time Filmmaker Award at the 2023 Fresh Coast Film Festival. Ben did such an incredible job of capturing the stunning beauty of Rush Creek and really telling the story of this important effort. So I'm now very excited to share with you the premiere screening of Weathering the Change, Climate Adaptation at Rush Creek. I'll also note, if you're having any difficulty watching the film as I show it in Zoom here, I will drop the link in the video to the chat so you can watch it on your own browser. So just give me a moment and I will get the video queued up.
Climate change is having an impact on Wisconsin. The Rush Creek project really started out of wanting to bring climate resiliency and adaptation to Wisconsin in a big way. Amy and Justin will talk about the various climate adaptation elements and what that actually translates to in terms of land management. It was selected because of its enormous ecological value.
3,200 acres of everything from the lowland forests, the wetlands, the streams, savannas. 2 miles worth of bluff prairies along the Mississippi. There's less than 0.1% of original prairie left in Wisconsin.
We have much oral history, a whole chunk of our ancestors sitting in what they call a place of refuge. We're part of this area. We breathe its air and we eat its food off the ground, and we're part of that soil that it comes from.
These systems have been managed by humans for thousands of years. We have a responsibility to steward these systems and continue to be a part of these systems. Justin Nooker, ecologist and the property manager for Rush Creek. There's always been this, I call it this looming existential kind of pressure about climate change.
More frequent and more intense rain events, floodwaters washing across the landscape. They can disperse non-native invasive species.
With increasing temperatures, we're seeing a lot of these invasive plants thrive.
And they outcompete native plants. trees getting stressed because of drought and extreme heat.
Wisconsin will become more like Iowa in temperature and rain and snowfall. We're seeing ranges moving for these species, whether you're a northern species moving north or a southern species moving north.
But if they're in very fragmented habitats, they can't really make that leap, and so they might just not make it at all.
So trying to get our systems as big as we can, as resilient as possible right now, before we really see climate change ramp up.
We used to step back and see what Mother the Earth wants to do with herself, but that way is no more. You have to find the ways to get through this day and age.
Look at our current management approaches. Will it continue to work into the future? Does it need to be adjusted or tweaked? Or do we need to scrap it and do something completely different?
Rush Creek is the first climate adaptation demonstration site that's in a grassland ecosystem in the state.
With a climate-ready planting list, we're collecting seeds from different sites surrounding Rush Creek for a prairie planting. And they all have slightly different traits. Annuals, biennials, perennials. It's taproots, fibrous roots, tall species, short-statured species, species that are drought tolerant, and species that can handle flooding and inundation. We're just trying to build diversity at so many different levels. Rush Creek has diverse topography, diverse native plant communities. It's just good to have this matrix of related communities that can kind of shift in response to different types of climate. Most of our natural communities in Wisconsin adapted over millennia with fire. Especially the grasslands, without regular fire, they can become overgrown, and then you no longer have prairie. Fire is becoming more difficult. We have these really wet springs. It just makes it too wet to burn. It gets too hot too fast, and then it's too volatile to burn. We are starting to burn in seasons that we didn't traditionally do.
This year in 2024, we started in February. That lengthens our season so we can get more burning done in a season. I like looking at, when I'm dead and gone, that these places will hopefully have hundreds of years of fire on the landscape again. These systems are resilient. You almost immediately see a certain response. Within a couple years, we see red-headed woodpeckers using our open oak woodland. Building in connectivity and size and thinking about defragmenting. Planting prairie plantings. Restoring wildlife corridors. That all enhances climate resiliency.
how are we going to change at the speeding up of environmental change? And so I think we're past that age of sitting on our hands.
Parts of my job is to help natural area managers grapple with climate change. So that's why we're here today.
What I love about Wisconsin is that Wisconsinites love our land.
For me, managing a place like Rush Creek, it's like a meaning of there's hope for the future. There's people that want to protect these places.
And see just the groundswell of support for this type of work. There's just so much potential for that to transcend beyond Rush Creek to these other places as well.
So I'm here to find out about strategies for managing our properties kind of in the long term.
A lot of the preserves that we manage are to be undergoing the same adaptation workshop model that was used here.
And it's really doable.
When you're at the site and you're walking through it, you realize this is amazing, this is special, this is right, this is the future.
All right. Well, I really hope you enjoyed the film. It's so special to get to share it with the world finally. It was just absolutely stunning. Ben did an incredible job with it. So we'll be posting the video link on our website. It'll be available for anyone to watch on our YouTube page. So we'll email that out to everyone participating in today's webinar, and please share it far and wide. We wanted to share, just as we wrap up here and move into our Q&A shortly, some ways that folks can get involved and support climate adaptation efforts. So we have some examples here, but one thing I like to use, and I'm really thinking about action, is that kind of Venn diagram of, what work needs to happen, but also what are you good at personally and what brings you joy? And whatever that is in the middle of that Venn diagram, put your energy there. Just some examples, certainly speak up for climate adaptation efforts here in Wisconsin and beyond. Support projects like these ones, like the Rush Creek one you just saw. You could become a member of NRF. You can join us. Definitely check out Wiki's website. There's tons of information, treasure trove of information on the website there about climate change impacts and the many different working groups who are working towards this work across the state. You can help track phenology data and engage in different citizen science projects to provide data that supports this work. Definitely create native habitat in your own backyard. Every little bit helps. One of the big climate impacts we're seeing in Wisconsin, of course, is flooding. So, do what you can to support wetland protections. If you are someone who cares for land, as a land manager, consider bringing this climate adaptation planning process to your property so that you can really incorporate some of these tenets into your work. And you can consider making a donation to Wisconsin's Climate Response Fund, which was set up to support projects just like these. If you're someone who really likes to dig into the science and data and best practices, there's a lot of resources you might be interested in. I won't name all of the ones here on the screen, but there's just a lot out there on different websites. So I will be emailing, or we'll be emailing links to these out after the webinar today as well. And Amy has also generously offered that if you are someone who is a land manager and you're interested in an adaptation workshop, please reach out to her and she's happy to kind of help you think about how to get started with that. Thanks, Amy, for that. And finally, before we head into our Q&A, I just wanted to extend a really big thank you to the many, many different people and groups who've made all of this work possible. First to Amy for her incredible expertise and support for all of these projects. Amy, you're amazing. And to everyone else on all of the project teams and the partners that we've worked with across all of these projects. You know who you are. You're incredible and really making this work happen. And big shout out to the DNR crews who are implementing a lot of that work, especially as you saw in the film. The Rush Creek is a tough site to work at. It's pretty steep there. So thanks to everyone for their work implementing this incredibly important stuff. It's really a team effort. Big thank you to Ben Albert for his outstanding visual storytelling and to my colleague Shelley Torkelson for all of her help as well. We're very grateful to NIACS, the Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science, and to Wiki for all of their resources and guidance that have made these projects possible. And a huge thank you to our funders who are really making this happen, including the Wildlife Conservation Society's Climate Adaptation Fund, provided by a grant to WCS from the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation, as well as the BRICO Fund, the Caris Foundation, Ed Newmiller, the Wisconsin's Climate Response Fund, and the Wisconsin Pollinator Protection Fund. And of course, thank you to our NRF members who help make this work possible. And with that, we are going to move into the Q&A. Sorry, I haven't had a chance to jump in there, Amy, but there have been some questions coming in.
I've been trying to field some,
awesome.
And some really good comments and suggestions and questions. I did notice that our colleague from the Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science, Danielle Shanahan, said, "What a wonderful piece of art and communication."
Oh, yay.
Thank you for putting this together. I hope the Rush Creek story gets out far and wide. Danielle made the adaptation workshop for Rush Creek happen. NIACS developed the technology to have these adaptation workshops held virtually during the pandemic and during lockdown. So thank you, Danielle, for your role in this great project.
Yeah, thank you, Danielle. All right, Amy, I see in the chat here, there's a question. What is the climate adaptation planning process? Amy, would you want to talk a little bit about what that is and what that looks like?
Sure. And again, I can just tell you a little bit, but feel free to reach out to me if you're interested in more information. But it is based on Adaptation Workbook, which was developed by the Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science. And it's just a very logical, satisfying framework. And it's based on a spreadsheet that has different steps that walk you through it. So first you look at your site and the different natural communities and consider how those different natural communities might be vulnerable to climate change. And step two, you reflect on your current management goals. And in the next step, you consider look at your management goals and approaches through a climate change lens, now that you understand how your different natural communities are vulnerable. And then you progress through the cycle and identify specific management actions. Like I said in the video, sometimes you confirm that what you're doing still remains viable, even with climate change. Sometimes you have to adjust what you're doing, and sometimes you just have to do something completely new. So it's a process that just fosters transparency, kind of show your work, and helps you with monitoring in the future. So adaptationworkbook.org is the base website. So you could take a peek there. You can watch for the handout that Kate will be emailing after the webinar, and we'll have more info there as well. I think those are two good starting places.
Cool. Thanks, Amy. I do have another one for you in the chat. So Juniper asks, recently there was great importance placed on local seed sourcing for plantings. It sounds like this is suggesting we can move away from this to get species that can handle warmer and wetter conditions. Does this mean to not worry about possible hybridizing?
I think that's a wonderful question. And I think the jury is still out in terms of just how far is too far when it comes to bringing species. But my general perspective that I've been promoting is that we have a wonderful palette of species in Wisconsin, that we don't need to be bringing species from areas further south, other than, maybe northern Illinois. But what we are advocating, and what we did at Rush Creek, is called regional admixture provenancing. And there you're collecting, like, let's say you want to have black-eyed Susan in your planting. So you'll collect black-eyed Susan from maybe like 4 or 5 different sites surrounding your planting area. And you're diversifying the genetic profile of your population in your planting. You're introducing a variety of local characteristics, and you're really just increasing the odds that the species will survive and thrive with climate change. And in general, we don't want people to be going too far away to get stuff. So as close as possible. And it's easier in a place like Rush Creek because you've got lots of beautiful prairies nearby. But if you're in southeastern Wisconsin, or in a place where it's more developed, it gets a little bit trickier. And so just kind of use moderation. But there definitely is risks of inbreeding depression and maladaptation if you're mixing genes from too far away.
Thanks, Amy. All right, we've got a question. Are the climate adaptation projects open to youth volunteers? And what I was going to share is, at the Rush Creek project, for example, we organized a volunteer work day. And so, definitely taking a look at the state natural areas volunteer program, which is really great. And they have a lot of different volunteer opportunities out there that can help, removing invasive species or brush cutting, that sort of thing, which is super helpful and contributes to these. So that would be a good starting point, I would suggest. Amy, I don't know if you have other ideas to add. I'll make a note to include that in my follow-up email too.
I'm kind of drawing a blank. I'm not sure. I mean, certainly, just from my perspective of climate adaptation, I'm not sure I have any opportunities, but so many of our conservation groups across the state will offer opportunities for young people to get involved.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I'll include a link to the State Natural Area Volunteer page in the follow-up. All right, got a question. To what extent do our efforts to build resilience depend on federal grants? Great and timely question. So we know that we've seen huge cuts across the federal government, and recently a lot of cuts to the conservation-related agencies, natural resource-related agencies. My perspective is that the conservation as a whole in the U.S. really relies on our federal partners, the agencies' funding, support. And so I think we're going to see, certainly significant impacts because there are a lot of federal, there's a lot of reliance on the federal government to support these efforts. But as we shared, there's a lot of partnerships, so it's not certainly not the only source for support or to make this work happen. The state is really leading a lot of this work. Nonprofit partners are, the tribes are deeply committed to this. So certainly it's really important, but it's not the only way that this work is happening. How long have we been working on these projects?
I just answered that and it disappeared. I started, I think it was about 2016 that I first started learning from colleagues with the Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science, and they were training us on how to use adaptation workbook, and we started to have workshops and work with natural area managers. So one thing I always say is that by doing this, we're all kind of like climate adaptation pioneers. This is all new. Climate change is new. The climate crisis is new, as one of our listeners suggested. So we're just doing everything we can to approach this in a thoughtful manner with the best available science and knowledge. So yeah, and I think I've been involved with, I want to say 7 climate adaptation workshops. I should count. But I should say that Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science, if you go to their website, they have hundreds of climate adaptation demonstration sites. And they're another group where you could reach out to learn about these workshops. They do them across the region.
Also, thanks for all of the comments in here. This is lovely. I see someone already put in the SNE volunteer page, which is great. And then someone shared that Waukesha County Land Conservancy is doing an SNE Volunteer Day this upcoming Sunday. So check that out if you're in the Waukesha area. All right. When diversifying remnant grasslands, did you have any discussions about preserving the historic plant community condition on site? Did you have any concerns that adding in additional species, even if native to Wisconsin, may negatively affect rare or conservative plant species on site? Amy?
Appreciate that question. I spent months working on a planting list for this particular project, and I have this huge spreadsheet. And I started with just a base list of species that already are known to occur at Rush Creek and within like 25 miles. And we have so many state natural areas in that region, and they're all some of the highest quality in the region, honestly, maybe even in the nation. Rush Creek is definitely a top Class A site. So honestly, I didn't really introduce species that aren't already locally present. I agree with your philosophy. And again, I think we have this amazing palette of species, especially for prairie plantings, where we don't need to go beyond that.
All right. Someone put in the chat, Mississippi Valley Conservancy has just planted a large prairie on former ag land at its Plum Creek project. Yes, that is an amazing project that, and Amy, you were involved with the workshop for that, weren't you?
Which one? Sorry,
Plum Creek.
Oh yeah, yes.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah, it's amazing just to see how many more of these are popping up. Mm-hmm. Okay, and I do see a question. Do we work within large park settings in urban town or city contexts? Amy, do you know about any demo sites in more urban areas? I'm sure there has to be.
I'm sure NIAX says.
Yeah.
The Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science. Mm-hmm. So if you go to forestadaptation.org and then go to a link where you can find demonstration sites, and you can do filters by location and by type of project. And I think there are some in there that are in park settings or urban town contexts.
Mm-hmm. And I definitely know that the funder for the Rush Creek project, or one of the funders, the Wildlife Conservation Society's Climate Adaptation Fund, has supported tons of these climate adaptation projects across the country. And they have an amazing website that tells stories of their projects too. And I'm fairly certain they've done work in more urban areas as well. So you could check out that website as well.
Any programs for river erosion in Racine County? You know, one of our wonderful partners in the state when it comes to thinking about slowing the flow of stormwater and promoting infiltration of stormwater is Wisconsin Wetlands Association. And they've definitely had some great projects and great resources that help people understand the importance of wetlands and how they can help slow the flow of water across the landscape, help keep waterways clean. That's not a program, but it is a lead.
Amy.
Yeah.
And I see the note from Jillian or Gillian about sharing this project locally, would love to do that. So I will be following up with you about ways to get the word out more locally. That would be wonderful. We've definitely been trying to get some media attention, and we had great features on WPR and the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel about the Rush Creek project, and a little bit of local coverage, but we love to do more and get people excited about it. So, all right. Any comment on diversifying larger tree species?
One thing that we've talked about at some workshops is kind of like the same principle of regional admixture provenancing, where you might have like a white oak that's a very important species on your property, and you need to maybe plant some more. Maybe you're having trouble with regeneration. There's some discussions of bringing white oak, same species, but from areas a little bit further south that are kind of pre-adapted to climate change. So that's one idea I have in response to that question.
All right. Oh, and I see some other suggestions for the Racine County question. Root Pike Win is a great resource. Good idea.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, and the county land conservationist for Racine County is a great place to start. So thanks for putting those in.
So glad for those suggestions.
Link to the film will be emailed out, so there will be like an email. Probably, I think tomorrow it'll go out. I schedule it through Zoom, and I'm going to put in links to everything. So you will get it if you are on this webinar. Awesome. A lot of great resources in here. Thank you, everyone.
So it's interesting. Someone says Steve Petchkall says, we just composed a database list of native and climate hardy tree choices for our area. There are other national resources that are evaluating the climate hardiness of trees. And certainly one of the resources that you'll see in the handout that Kate sends you is the National Forest Service Tree Atlas, Climate Tree Atlas, and then also other resources, again, from the Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science, like their forest field guides that help you see which species will be vulnerable and which will, sometimes you actually have climate change winners. So it's not all 100% bad. Those species that are drought tolerant will probably do better. So, but that's exciting to know that people are making lists. I'm making lists. You got to get these things out there and share. The Wiki Forestry Working Group is another group that does a lot of great stuff. They have amazing resources on their webpage, including this type of information.
Okay, Amy, I see a question about how can our local garden district neighborhood association in Milwaukee implement some of these ideas? I was thinking again in a more urban context.
I think that Wiki can definitely, the broader Wiki, so not just my Plants and Natural Communities Working Group, but the broader Wiki can help you. And we have working groups that do address urban settings and infrastructure. My mind drifts back to the importance of wetlands and maybe, like rain gardens that are kind of like urban wetlands that help slow the flow of stormwater. So I would say you could peruse the Wiki website and see if you find anything that inspires you, and maybe you can make some connections. For every working group, there's a list of contact people to reach out to and talk to in person. And Kate and I are always happy to help too. If we can help direct you, we'll try.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And just again, like adding, right, native native plants where we can in our urban communities is so important too for this work and for pollinators and bees and birds and whatnot.
It's 1 o'clock.
Okay, all right. It is time for lunch for us since I didn't get a chance to eat. So thank you everyone for joining. We're so grateful for your time and your interest in this. And yeah, please reach out to either of us. Our contact information will be in the follow-up email. I think it should go out. I have to schedule it, but I think it'll go out by tomorrow. So just stay tuned for that. And yeah, please spread the word about the film. We hope as many people can see it. So thank you so much. We're so grateful. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for joining.